Hello there. In this video we're going to visit all of the Premier League grounds in Google Earth VR. Starting here with Newcastle United at St James's Park, we'll visit all 20 of the teams for the 2024-25 season, starting in the north and heading south. Newcastle are the 8th most successful team currently in the English top tier in terms of title wins, with 4. They also have the longest wait since their last title, with it coming all the way back in 1927. This most recent spell in the top division started in 2017. The capacity of the ground is 52,305 seats. Next up, we'll drop down into the 53,400 seat capacity Etihad Stadium. This is home to Manchester City, whose current run in the Premier League began in 2002. Since winning their 3rd title in 2012, they have stormed up the list of clubs with the most titles, now sitting 4th of the teams currently in the division. Their win last season put them into double figures, with 8 of those wins coming in a little over 20 years. Aiming to win what would be an unbelievable 5th consecutive title, they've actually hit a rough patch of form in the 24-25 season, and midway through they look very unlikely to add another one this time round. Would it be dangerous to assume that though, given their dominance in recent years? Staying in Manchester, and the ground with the highest capacity in the league at 74,310 seats, it's Old Trafford, which is of course the home of Manchester United. The dominant force in English football for a long time, with Alex Ferguson as manager, and still way out in front in the table of most top tier wins with 20, 13 of those coming in just over 2 decades during Ferguson's time at the club. But it's now over a decade since their last championship win back in 2013, and it must be all the more frustrating for them and their fans to be looking further than ever from winning the league again, at a time when their noisy neighbours are in an uncharacteristic slump that could otherwise have been exploited. Moving west along the M62 motorway to Merseyside now for the 2 teams in the city of Liverpool. Everton first and Goodison Park in the final season that the team will be playing at this ground. A new stadium at Bramley-Moore Dock, right on the banks of the Mersey, will be their new home for the 25-26 season. The capacity at Goodison is 39,572, with the new home at Bramley-Moore providing a jump up to 52,888. The club have been in the top tier since 1954, though they have flirted with relegation on multiple occasions in that time, often for multiple seasons in a row. Those close shaves do mean the club does still top the list of most seasons spent in the English football top tier there with 122. It'd be far less if they'd actually been relegated at any point. There were more successful times in the past, with 9 title wins overall, though the last of those was back in 1987. Maybe a fresh start with new owners and a new home will help them return to better days. Next up, Liverpool FC and their home at Anfield. Slightly less boxed in by Victorian streets than their neighbours, they've regularly expanded the ground and now have a capacity of 61,267. Their current run in the top division began way back in 1962, and but for Man United's dominance in the Ferguson era, they'd be top of the list of title winners, mostly due to their own dominant spell in the 70s and 80s. After a long wait, they added to their title haul as the only team to break the current Manchester City dominance, winning in 2020. At the time of making this video, midway through the 24-25 season, they are in a very strong position and favourites to win this time. If they can keep up their form and win this one, they will catch up to United again, with both clubs then having 20 titles. After a long absence from the top division, Nottingham Forest are in their third season since their most recent promotion. Their city ground has a capacity of 30,455. Forest are one-time winners of the top league title back in 1978. Although they've never added a second championship win, they did win the 78-79 European Cup competition, giving them entry into the next year's, which they also won. That makes them the only club to have won the Senior European Cup more often than their own league championship. Next up, we have the King Power Stadium, home of Leicester City. They are back in the top division, having been promoted at the first time of asking following relegation the season before. Most leagues tend to have a small number of teams that are the likely candidates to win at any point in time. The English League is no exception, and in the Premier League era, there has been a big 4, 5 or 6 team group that has been difficult to break into for the rest. Leicester's one top-tier title win in 2016 is probably the most unexpected upset to the status quo in English football in recent years, maybe ever. Unfortunately for them, they are more looking over their shoulder at the drop zone and relegation than eyeing a second title this season. Aston Villa have spent most of the last 50 years in the highest division, though they did spend a few years in the second tier until rejoining the Premier League in 2019. With 7 titles, they are up there with the most successful of clubs in the English League, though there was a long wait between their 6th title in 1910 and their most recent and 7th in 1981. Villa Park was one of the grounds regularly used in the past for FA Cup semi-finals to provide a neutral venue for those matches. More recently, the semis and the final are all played at Wembley though. The current capacity of the stadium is 42,657. Molineux is the 31,750-seater home of Wolverhampton Wanderers. Their current spell in the top tier since being promoted in 2018 is one of their best since their heyday back in the 1950s. All 3 of their championship wins came in that decade, the last of those being in 1959 and following up on also winning in the previous season. The most easterly of the locations we're visiting is Portman Road, and the home of Ipswich Town is in fact the only one with a positive figure in the longitude column. Although their one title was won in 1962, the most consistent spell in the top division came through the 70s and early 80s. Returning to the top division for the first time in around 20 years this season, it'll be interesting to see if they can survive. Though not impossible, there is a hypothetical gulf that's grown between the top 2 English leagues in recent years, and a lot of promoted sides have immediately gone back down in their first season. They might yet make it, but if their current position, just one place above the bottom of the table, is anything to go by, the fans need to enjoy their time at the top table while they can. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is one of the newest, most modern venues in the Premier League, and with a capacity of 62,850 seats is the second highest. Apart from a couple of seasons in the 70s, Spurs have been in the top tier since their first league title was won in 1951, in their first season after promotion. The second of their 2 titles came 10 years later in 1961. They've had spells of being regular top 3 finishers in the 80s and Twenteens, but have never quite managed to make a third title their own. As there are user-generated 360-degree images in Google Earth VR, in addition to Google's own Street View content, we actually get to do a little time travel here and have a little look inside the White Hart Lane Stadium that the new one replaced on virtually the same site. North London rivals to Spurs next with Arsenal at their 60,704-seater Emirates Stadium. Only trailing Man United and Liverpool, Arsenal have the third highest tally of top division titles at 13. The most recent of those was in 2004, when they were also the only team to go a full 38-game season without losing a match. The team from that season are generally referred to as the Invincibles. In a similar vein to the time travel at the last round, this time we get a bit of a behind-the-scenes sneak peek. Some familiar names, including one in particular that has returned to the club in a different role, as we get a look at the Arsenal dressing room. The London Stadium is home to West Ham United. It's a 62,500-seat stadium originally built for the Olympics in 2012. Though the Olympics mean the ground has a historic history with various world records being set there, it hasn't as yet helped the Hammers to a league title. In fact, they're the first team we've visited that have never won a top division title. The closest they've come so far was a third place in 1986. They did win their first European trophy in 2023, but one wonders how long they might have to wait to join Leicester, Ipswich and Forest with a first top-tier league title. Brentford have spent the majority of their existence in the third tier or below, returning to the top division in 2021 for the first time since being relegated in the first season after the Second World War, though they had spent a few years in the top division before the war caused the league to be suspended. In the time they've been in the elite division, they have been competitive and entertaining, bucking the trend of promoted sides tending to struggle. The move to the 17,250-seater Brentford Community Stadium came just prior to that promotion. And again we get to do a bit more time travelling to see the site of the new ground early in the building process. Stamford Bridge is the home of Chelsea. Their first title was in 1955, but they would have to wait until 2005 for the next. They did follow that immediately with another the next season, and in all won 5 in the Abramovich era, for a total of 6 now. Chelsea are going to be the last club we'll visit that have won the top division title, with their most recent success coming in 2017. There have been rumours and plans of a potential move to a new location for years now, but as yet, nothing has come of that. Maybe we'll be visiting Chelsea in a new home somewhere in the future version of this video. Fulham's most recent residency in the Premier League began in 2022. That followed a few years of yo-yoing, but generally the period since the turn of the century has been their most consistent in terms of playing in the top division. Craven Cottage is located right on the banks of the River Thames. The Riverside stand has been expanded in recent years, with the ground capacity now standing at 29,589. I think there's more time travel involved in what we're seeing for this one, though with the user-generated images not having the Google copyright year watermarked on them, it's hard to tell what was taken when. The home of Crystal Palace is Selhurst Park, South London. The stadium has a capacity of 25,486 seats. Early in their existence, Palace were largely a settled third-tier team, mostly playing in that division from the 1920s to the 1950s. After a brief dip down into the fourth tier, they won promotions up 2 levels and became a more settled fixture in the second tier, one spell back in the third tier and a few forays into the top division aside. In the last decade though, Palace have become a solid top-tier club, since most recently being promoted in 2013. Although Southampton are one of the current Premier League teams never to have won the top division, they did come very close in 1984, finishing second to winners Liverpool. They were promoted this season after a single season stay in the second tier, and apart from a longer spell in the lower divisions in the early 2000s, have been an almost exclusively top division side since the 1970s. St Mary's Stadium is a 32,384-seater located on the banks of the River Itchen. The Amex, or more formally the American Express Community Stadium, is a 31,876-seater stadium that is the home of Brighton and Hove Albion. Other than a brief period in the early 1980s, Brighton's current spell in the top division is their first, with the club having been promoted to the Premier League in 2017. A sixth place finish in the 2022-3 season was their best ever league position. Bournemouth's Dean Court is the most southerly ground we visited. It also has the lowest capacity by far at 11,307 seats. Spending almost the entirety of their existence in the third tier, Bournemouth made their first ever appearance in the top division after winning the Championship title in 2014. Though they have since spent a couple more seasons in Tier 2, they were promoted again in 2022. Approaching the midpoint in the season and sitting in 6th place in the table, it's probably safe to say they'll be enjoying at least next season still at the top table. Thanks for watching. See you next time.